and some of our signature stuff. And so I'll go ahead and do that, and then Andy, you can do yours. Really, our signature ministry started, let's see, we're in the 9th season of Upward. And Stanwood is not very big. If you've ever been through it, it's not very big. Northline Drive, and yeah, don't blink. You don't even have to slow down going through Stanwood. You've got the curve, you should, but you don't have to legally. We are officially a Class C school, but Stanwood by itself, we're with Morley Stanwood. Stanwood by itself is probably about 600 people. And so for us to have our signature ministry of Upward Basketball, it's pre-K through 6th grade. We have this year, we're right around 350 kids. So that means over 40 teams. That means when you add in relatives that see kids play, moms and dads, we're easily reaching each season around 1,000 or more people. And Upward is the largest sports outreach ministry in the world. What we do is it's basketball. We pay attention to detail, and this morning I talked about bridges. That's the bridge. We pay attention to detail. We've got actual coaches that coach high school teams that are coaches for our Upward teams, as well as other volunteers. And so we pay attention to detail. And so those that aren't, we've got somewhere between half and 2/3 of our people that we connect with don't have a church home. But they know that we're going to do devotions. We're learning Bible verses. We're learning virtues during each practice. In the middle of the practice, all the teams stop. We go over our virtues. We go over our devotion for the day. We give the kids a chance to respond to Christ at the last practice. And the parents know this. It's not a secret at all. But they're willing to send their kids because of the quality of the basketball instruction. Mm-hmm. And so that is a bridge for us to talk about Jesus and to connect with them while they're there. And we'll talk more about that. We started out our first year with about 100, and which surprised the people in South Carolina. And then now we've grown to, and we're actually one of the largest Upward programs that they have. It is co-ed, absolutely. Yep, it's absolutely co-ed.
What age categories?
Pre-K through 6th grade. Out of that, developed our youth program, and because we didn't want to lose touch with the kids while we had that window of opportunity open. And so that's what we're known for. I mentioned this morning that when I go around Big Rapids or Morley Stanwood or other, we reach a good half-hour radius. Mm-hmm. So we've got kids from Hershey and other towns because of the quality of the program we have. And so when I go around, I can say I'm from Northland United Methodist Church. That doesn't always mean a lot. But when I say we're the ones that put on Upward, that opens a huge door for us. And I can talk with them about it, and we can talk more about that. That's our signature ministry now. That opened the door for us to think as a church. That started actually before I got there. I've only been there for 4 years. Before I got there, we started thinking outside of our doors and going to where the people are. Andy.
All right. My name's Andy, and I'm pastor at Pilgrim United Methodist Church in St. John's, or just southwest of St. John's. Been there almost 4 years as well. I think the big thing that we don't have necessarily a signature program like Gary does, but we do have a couple different areas of emphasis. One is the church has a strong children's ministry, and so we do some different outreach and bridge things to try and show love to the community and the kids in the community and invite them into what's going on with that. The thing that I'll focus on more today is we're just half a mile west of a trailer park that's just down the road, and I know they tried to reach out to them before, but it's been really neat because God has just opened some doors for us to have this relationship with the trailer park, and we've done spring cleanup projects as part of our Easter response. How do we live out the resurrection in the world? And so people sign up for that. We do monthly movie nights now. We've done trunk or treats down there, so we're kind of out in the country. So we can do a trunk or treat, and I don't know if you're familiar with a trunk or treat. You decorate your car trunk, and kids come, you give them candy. It's kind of a fun deal. We could do that at our church parking lot, but like we're out in the country, so you can get all 20 people and really give them candy. It'd be awesome. But we thought we might as well go down to our neighbors and just reach out to them. And so we've really done. This has taken some time. We've really done a bit of work though, just sharing Christ's love with our neighbors, and I guess we can talk more I guess as we go, but help me remember. I want to talk about how, and I want to say this as a word of encouragement. I want to talk about kind of where we started with that and where we're at now. So don't let me forget that as we get going.
So this is a community outreach project, but how has your church membership benefited from it? Or is there a benefit?
The church membership has benefited from taking seriously Christ's command to go into the world and make disciples of Jesus Christ, show love of Christ to the world. And so we do have a couple people that have come. But one thing that I'll say, and I'll try and say very clearly to y'all, loving people outside the walls, if it's about institutional preservation for us, then it's really not worth our time, and so you do see stuff, but this is like one of the ways I view it is you're sowing seeds for who knows when, and the stuff Gary talked about as far as when he talks to people and they say, oh, you're the church that does upwards. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but every once in a while people are a little antagonistic towards church. Has anyone noticed that towards church? What would you give? What would the marketing budget be for your church to where someone would smile and say, oh, you guys do that? How much is that worth to you? And I don't mean worth to you like we need to do like advertising to benefit the organization. I just mean like if you want to spread the love of Christ in the town and you want people's first association with you is, oh, you care about us. So that's the biggest thing is and so one example of that I'll try not to get weepy. I'm an emotional guy, but we had a phone call. This was just a couple months ago. We had a phone call. There's a lady who moved out of the park, and she had somebody that she had been kind of mentoring, a young man, his high school age, that she had been mentoring, and she moved out, and she was really concerned about this family. And so she was trying to figure out what to do, how do I look out for this family. She called the church office and she said, my name's so-and-so, here's the situation. She said, I don't know what to do, but I hear that Pilgrim does a lot for this church, for this trailer park, and I just wondered if you guys could help. Like, oh my gosh, like that means that word on the street at the trailer park is,
They'll help.
They love us. They love us. They care. I love that. Like that's close to my heart of just being in ministry, that people would know that somebody cares. So, yeah. Do you want me to just get into the principles then?
Let's do that. Let's double check. What time were we supposed to be done? What time did we start?
4:45.
Supposed to be done by 8, right? Is that
We won't go after that unless we order pizza.
My mom might be upset. She's got
I think
kids.
it was about 4:45.
Yeah.
45.
4:45.
Because we want to allow time for you to
For
gather in
questions,
small
yeah.
groups and questions and small groups to brainstorm based on what you've heard today. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so with that being said, our goal is, so we want to share some things to get you thinking and then give you guys some time to talk. But as we talked about, like what would actually be helpful, because as pastors you get to go to all sorts of stuff. The stuff that ends up being more helpful, and that, as we talked about, is to get some ideas and then be invited to think, what does this matter for my context, and to be able to kind of process that with people around you. That's what we want you to do. Like Gary and I aren't, like the goal, when we sat down we didn't say, well, people either need to be doing trailer park ministry or upwards, and if we don't get them to do that, we failed. Like that's not the whole goal. The goal instead is to hopefully give you guys just some of the questions that we asked and some of the things that we looked at, and then invite you to think, okay, how does this matter in our church? That sort of thing. So I'll start with, you guys have probably never had any devotions done from this or anything, but from Matthew 28. This is after the resurrection of Jesus, which is a pretty amazing thing. Like, so Jesus is there with the disciples after the resurrection. It says in verse 16, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. which is, there's a whole bunch of stuff right there, just think about. But Jesus then came and said to them, again, like they've like seen him crucified, now they see him alive. He says to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Remember, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Go and make disciples and baptize. Go out. We've taken that seriously, trying to figure out what does it mean for us then to go out and to make disciples. And we're in an increasingly post-Christian setting, which is different than a completely secular setting, because what we have is a memory of Christendom. And so you have people who think they know but they don't know what they don't know, but yet are still detached from church and from faith of some sort, or ill-defined faith or whatever. And we're not in a situation where people just go to church anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've heard of the statistics, but I mean the average attender, they used to consider someone a regular attender if they were there 4 times a month. Now if they're there 1 or 2 times a month, they're a regular attender. That's a whole different thing, right? So we're in a situation where this is, if we are going to show the love of Christ, which we are, commanded to do, if we're going to show the love of Christ to a community, then we're going to have to go into the community. And so to do that, we started by, one of the things I had the benefit of when I came into Pilgrim, they have had for years, and part of this is just understanding who you are. For years, they've done all sorts of missionary work, especially with Haiti, but also there was pastors, Ken and Merlin Pratt, who were there a couple of people before I was there, who started some missionary work in Jamaica. And so within this church body, there was a history of financially supporting and sending out missionaries. So you take that impulse and say, okay, what does it mean for us to be missionaries here? What does it mean for us to live and to think and to act as missionaries? Which means part of it is identifying where we're at. And so we have to ask, how do we love our neighbors in Christ? And so to kind of set these are some principles and core values that we start to operate from. How do we love our neighbors in Christ? And then how can we be in the community? And that's important in that you don't want to just you want to be in the community in a way to make sense, in a way that fits the context. Again, if you think in terms of being a missionary, what does being a missionary look like in your setting? What do people value? Where are they at? That sort of thing. And how can you be in that community? The third thing that Gary and I talked about is it's not a short-term fix. So you shouldn't expect that if you go and do the trailer park ministry that next week 30 people from the park are at your church. Okay? In fact, you might never get any. You don't know. I just know that Jesus has called me to love people, and they're literally my neighbors. And so we do that. It's not a short-term fix. And then you get the investment in the community usually pays off. Not only does it pay off later, but it pays off in unexpected ways. So the story I told you about the lady calling the church, we never sat down and said, you know what, here's a goal. Let's have a goal that some random person calls the church because she heard we love them. You don't know how it's going to pay off. There's a lot of stuff you can't control or you don't know. What you do, though, is you just say, how can we love our neighbors? So it's not a short-term fix. And I'd also say it's okay to fail. I don't mean please don't hear that. I'm not saying it's okay to not do your best. You need to do your best. We're doing this for the glory of God. You do as well as you can. But you also have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to try an event that absolutely bombs. There's a saying, and I listen to a lot of permaculture stuff, which is an alternative agriculture thing, and a dorky hippie thing. But within that, they'll say you have to be willing to bake a lot of bad pies before you bake a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense, doesn't it? When you say it that way, it makes sense. If you want to be the master of cherry pie baking, first off, if you are, let me be the judge of that and bring me some. But if you do, you know that you're going to mess up before you get it right. Same thing with riding a bike. Why would we expect when we're going to do something for the church that we're going to pull it off perfect the first time? So you do your best, and then you always step back and say, how'd that go?
Mhm.
And is there anything we can adjust or do? But be willing to fail, and don't take that failure as this is something. Don't take that failure as, hey, as an absolute failure. And I, as we were talking about this, one of the things I feel pastorally. So, as shepherd of the congregation, one of my responsibilities is to make sure to discipleship. One of the ways that you grow in discipleship is by ministering to others. If we do an event, we've done this before. Last Christmas we tried an event, and there were like 20, 25 people from Pilgrim down there, and like 4 people from the park showed up, right? Should have been more. However, when I look around the room, and I see a bunch of people from Pilgrim that have taken time out of their schedule in December for the one reason that Jesus told us to love our neighbors, and we love our neighbors, so we're going to do this.
Mhm.
Like, I can't call that a failure, though, right? Like, they are growing in discipleship. Now, did we reevaluate some things? Yeah, we changed the date, and we're trying it different, and for sure. However, if people are sharing the love of Christ as best we can, there are worse things you could do.
Yeah, short-term results, I can talk about that with Upward, because Upward, we had 5 seasons under our belt when I came in, and a number of people mentioned quietly, they're nice people there, but they mentioned quietly that, we're bringing all these kids in, but we're not really seeing much results on Sunday morning. Have you heard something like that with something you've tried? And us, we didn't see much of that, and so we looked at that in a number of ways, and one of the ways we looked at that was branding. But we weren't going to use that word. What was the word I wanted to use there?
Relationship, right? Bridges. Or
So, in terms of, well, it just name recognition is what we wanted to use, and so what we want people. This is different, and some people are confused about this, and this is important to understand, because some people are confused because they've heard the scripture, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Has anybody ever heard that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that does not apply when your church is reaching out. That is seeking glory for yourself, but when the glory is for your church and for Christ, it's a whole different deal. You want people to know, in a humble way when they ask, oh, okay, who are you and why are you doing this? So we looked at some different approaches, and one of the things we did was last year we switched the first practice. We usually practice and play games at the public school. We don't have a gym, and so we do the public school. And one of the things we did, we brainstormed, and last year we started having the first practice where we handed out the uniforms. We had that at our church. I mean, now there's no ambiguity. This is the church in here that puts on Upward. We had one coach, interestingly,
That's our furnace.
Oh my God.
actually, we had one coach that complained about it. He said, "Why are we having it in the church? We're wasting time." And actually, what actually had happened was Mandy and I, with having the first practice of the church handing out uniforms, we gave them an extra practice where they didn't have to worry about uniforms while they're at the gym. So we maximized their gym time. But the non-Christians, you see, we did a number of things. We helped people understand that our church is doing this. We helped, again, half to 2/3 of Upward kids are not churched. And how many have been in the church at least 5 years? At least 5 years, okay. So going into your church is not a big thing for you. But for somebody that's unchurched, de-churched, never churched, going through those doors for the first time is a big deal. It's some kind of crisis that gets you there. It may be a good crisis like a wedding or a birth of the family, or it may be a more challenging crisis like a hospital visit or a funeral. But they're coming through the doors. So now with Upward, the first practice, they're coming in the doors. And then the investment, after a while, we looked for a couple of years. We hired a youth director to try to connect better with those kids. But now the last couple of years, God has started multiplying things, because we are able to. We've got a ministry in the schools, in the junior high. We've got a ministry there, and also we've got an after school ministry, where we call that kids club, where kids would be going home. For years, our signature ministry was a cooperative preschool, and now we found out there's a need in the community for after school, so the elementary kids don't go home to an empty house, and so that opened the door for that. And I started a family late, and so I'm 57. I've still got a ninth grader, and between that and I'm a volunteer track coach, I can go in the school at any time. And we've got that kind of connection because of what Upward has done for the school. We're actually the school loves having us do Upward because they don't have to do any planning, and we are a feeder program for not only good skills but good character people. Because one of the things of Upward is sportsmanship, and Christ-likeness is another. And so we're a feeder program, and so we feed into the Morelia Stanwood Public Schools. They don't have to do anything but a little extra heat and lights. So, but it took a while. It took a while, and out of our connection with the schools, now we started this fall. We've got a 5th quarter outreach event where we've got a number of 9th graders and some 10th graders. We started there. We knew it was going to be a hard connect for the 11th and 12th graders, but we started at the 9th and 10th, and it's really a pre-evangelism event where we just provide a safe place for youth to be for a couple hours. And interestingly, most of the funding from that came from, guess where? Outside the church, because of my connections that I had made. $100 came from a funeral home in town. The funeral director was tired of seeing and doing funerals for high schoolers with alcohol and drugs and such. And after games is a time where that happens. And so I got most of my funding outside, and literally our youth director can't spend the money fast enough because people keep giving their money to continue the 5th quarter and keep donating things and volunteering to be a part of that. Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, 5th quarter's cool.
It sounds like though that you were a coach and you had a passion that you built into this Upward program. How do you...
Good, but it started 5 years before I got there.
Oh, okay.
The cabinet got it exactly right with sending me there.
Okay. That's a wonderful thing. But what I would like to understand, and maybe some of you have experiences, how do you tap into the needs of your community?
That's a great segue. Let's go for that.
The next thing. So two things I really want you to hold on to.
Okay, that's fine.
So 2 huge questions is who are you and where are you?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you and where are you? Because so part of what you're asking is the where are you, the needs of the community. Who are you? It's just what are the strengths of your congregation? What I told you, was as I was appointed a pilgrim, one of the very first things that was apparent to me was a strong heart for missions. So of course, let's go with that. Like you don't fight natural energy flows. Don't fight natural talent. I mean, God has gifted and placed you in your area, and so look at and if you have a lot of teachers or retired educators, then you think, well, how can we use that? How can we use that strength? Or if you have a lot of coaches, yes, how can you use that strength? If you've got a lot of people who are handymen that can fix things, how do you use that strength? So the first step is just identifying who the heck are we? Or what are our strengths? What are our passions? And what would have the energy to grow on its own? The second thing is where are we? And so that's a lot of understanding your community and your location within the community. Some of that involves, some of the getting to know the community is, I don't know if you are familiar with Mission Insight. You've probably heard people talk about it before, but you can use Mission Insight. And one of the things I've used that for in our congregation is to just do some number crunching. So I defined an area around St. John's that also included such exotic places as just outside of Ovid. Maybe you've heard of the exotic location of Ovid, or right before Powamo, right? People write home about Powamo. And so you got this kind of circle here, and in that circle was 18,000 people. Went through and did the statistics, and I believe it was 42% of the people there were connected to a church, which is actually higher than the average. So, so 58% were not, which means there's 10,670 people in our area that were not connected to Christ to a church. Now, I can guarantee you, if I were to pull in a significant number of the congregation and you were to ask them, what is the 10,000? They would be able to tell you that, because I kept doing that. And part of that
And
was
where did you get this information?
Mission Insight.
Mission
So I
Insight.
went
How to
through
get
and did that.
Conference resource, it's
It's a
free.
conference
Every
resource.
single church can access it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can do that for your area.
Okay.
And do figure out, and it's just a little bit of digging to figure out the percentages and whatnot, and then you figure out this is who we are, where we are. The other thing that
If you've got somebody familiar with the computer, you can literally draw the lines exactly how. You can draw a circle, you can draw a rhombus, you can do whatever, however far out you normally would reach.
Yeah.
And then it just gives you the statistics for that?
Then you can collect things like what's the population of that area, and then you can also collect things like
Population, medium income,
Yeah.
results of the last census,
Yeah.
surveys that have been done, attitudes towards church,
Yeah.
where they are in life, how many kids they have, where the kids go to school. You can get pages and pages and pages and
Yeah.
pages. Call the conference office and tell them you want a Mission Insight account for your church. It's free. We pay for it anyway.
Okay,
Everybody,
great.
every single church should.
Your ministry shares.
Yep.
and you can
Yep.
Thank you.
and then you
I
can
don't know
just
about
boil
it,
it
did you
down
guys?
to you can just boil it down to just some stuff that's very useful, like for us
It's
to
required a new
identify
pastor
that there's
orientation
10,000
for them to
people.
do it.
Because we're in St. John's, and there's a lot of churches in St. John's, and maybe you can get the idea that, oh, I guess just everybody goes to church.
Oh, man.
Because it may be very likely that a lot of your friends do go to church, and so you don't know anybody who doesn't go to church, and then
Right.
all of a sudden you get those hard numbers in front of you, like, no, there's 10,000 people. That means when you go to Kroger, a lot of those people you're rubbing shoulders with. When you hold the door for someone, the person who walks through, these are people who need Jesus. Like, I may be goofy, but I am utterly convinced, and this is because it's true in my life, I'm utterly convinced that people need Jesus. They need Jesus, and that it is better for people to have Jesus than not. And because of that, that number affects me, and we talk about that. The other part of that is then, what is the community like? What is it made up of? And so you try to be in the community and learn about that. And so with us, again, it was we're a church park. We've got some teachers who know where some of those kids go to school, and so then you start kicking around ideas of what natural gifts do we have, and how can we apply that there. So who are we and where are we?
We began our latchkey ministry. We skipped a couple steps with Mission Insight. We actually didn't go through Mission Insight. There are other ways you can get that data. We had a pre-K teacher as part of our church, and she said our signature ministry was a cooperative preschool, and she said, and we had an addition to our church, and then so we shut it down for a year. When we were getting ready to start it again, this teacher was part of the group to restart it, and she said, I know we're going to do the preschool again, but boy, there's really a need for latchkeys, something like that, so kids don't have to go home to empty houses. And so we do that, and with that, what we do is, again, it's not just church. It's really a lot of evangelism, pre-evangelism, because we start with devotion, but then we've got a number of teachers, retired teachers in our church, and we give half an hour help with homework. Doesn't seem like a huge thing to me. I did okay in school, but some of these kids go home and their parents did not do well in school. And so even if their parents do help them, even if their parents do help them, they may not know how to do it and give the best help. And so we've got, I don't know if you heard about the new second grade math, but last year that was one of the things we were helping our kids with and we had teachers, parapros that would come in and volunteer for that, partly because Christy would twist their arm, but another part is they liked what we were doing. We're not charging a thing for it, we're just doing it as a ministry. And so word is getting out more and more the more things we do that our church cares for kids in our community.
So you go to their school, or do you have them bus to you?
They're
Or
actually
that
bused
day?
to us, yes, is how that works. So we have every
So
week.
this is housed within your church
It is.
proper?
It is, and the beauty is we're literally right down the road from
Oh, okay.
from the school. So again, look at your community. What does your community need? And that ties in with one of the books I read said, if you want to know what your community needs, go to some leaders in your community. Go to your mayor, go to your superintendent, school board, and then instead of saying, how can you help us as a church, ask them, how can we help you? That's one of the things Upward does is through our concessions. It's totally nobody takes a salary, nobody earns anything with Upward. It's all volunteer. And then with our concessions, we sell hot dogs and candy and stuff. We're there from 8 to 6, and with that money, we bless the school. Last year, we bought an AED for $800 and gave that to the school, so that the elementary school had an AED in their school, and they didn't have to find millage money or whatever to buy that. And so we continue to bless the community by Upward.
I have a question. Your latchkey program, is that an everyday?
It is not, because our church is not big enough to do it every day. I want to succeed, and we talked about it, and we do it Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay.
We wanted to get a win under our belt, and we started in April and did it for that part of the year. Now we've been doing it for almost 2 years, and we've got a number of snowbirds, and we didn't know if we'd be able to. We wanted to be able to staff it through the winter, and that was a serious concern about it.
Mm-hmm.
But literally every day, God provides. Our people are not the best about signing up in advance, so they give the leaders some stress. But every day, there's enough or more than enough. And the first handful of months, I was there helping a lot. Now, if somebody shows up, I don't insist on helping. I just quietly back out and let the people of the church and outside the church. We've got somebody from the Lions Club that heard about what we were doing, and she goes to Catholic church, but she wants to be a part of what we're doing. And so, hey, I'll gladly back up. I got other things going on. I got a day job, so.
So how do you handle liability when you're taking children and families
my
that you
question.
don't
It's the
know?
bus.
Pardon me?
The bus picks them up and drops them off. So
But they're under your care, and so you have some liability during the hours that you're housing those children.
while they're there, it's under the trustee umbrella.
Oh.
And he's, yeah.
Okay.
Does
So
Upwards,
see that one.
Oh, I
does
see.
Upwards give
Alright.
me the resources for background checks and that sort of stuff then too?
Yeah.
We do background checks for Upward, yes. That's a separate thing, but yes, we do background checks for Upward, all of our coaches. Yep.
We have a similar program at New Hope. It only meets 1 day a week. But again, the kids are bused from the local elementary school. It's called Kingdom Kids. And it's basically based on Vacation Bible School curriculum.
Okay, so you,
Because we don't offer Vacation Bible School. So we take the Vacation Bible School and break it up through the entire school year. And this year we're doing Aspire Academy.
so you honestly go further than we do. We're just using that to build bridges right now, is what we're doing. That's our goal.
Well, we started out last year was the first year we had it, and we had maybe average probably 15 kids. Now we average probably 30 kids at least, and we break them into groups, and we also provide for the kids, when the parents come to pick them up, a free will dinner for the community. And whatever you want to give, and if you can't afford to give anything, come anyway. We're not asking, and we're not in the business of making a profit on that dinner.
That's a good way to go. And you've done some research there to know that in our area, Stanwood, and over by New Hope, Mecosta area, it's kind of a depressed area. A lot of free lunches for
the
kids going through school, and so that's a way to connect with what the needs are in the community.
To just, I guess, give a couple examples to emphasize again the who are we and where are we, and then we'll move into, I guess, the next step. Want to consistently ask that. So I've mentioned that we have done Trunk or Treat at Pilgrim. I was previously in Carson City, and in Carson City, so at Pilgrim we're in the country, again, I thought we could do a trunk or treat, but it would be in an open parking lot in the country, and good luck getting kids there, or if you do, whatever. So we thought, hey, we can help out our neighbors and do that. In Carson City, the church is right downtown. And Carson City is a great setup for trick-or-treating. Like, it's just a little country town on a grid, and there's like, the town doubles in size on Halloween night. And you just get roving bands of children begging for candy. And so, because of that, then we knew that the church building was in the natural traffic flow of a lot of kids. Now, at Carson City, we had like 130 people in worship. There were 1,100 people in the community, 1,100 people. We would regularly give out 500 to 600 trick-or-treat bags, because that was the natural flow of stuff. And so then we had the opportunity to share the love of Christ with that number of kids. Another thing that was different there, and this is again looking at, I want you to ask, what are our strengths and what are our opportunities? In Carson City, we did something called Kids Hope USA, which is a mentoring program. And one of the things I really appreciated about it is you have to have somebody pay to send a liaison to a training. It's a couple $1,000, so there's a chunk to it. But we had that donated by one person actually. As an answer to prayer, it was really coincidental how that worked out. Anyway, so we sent a woman from the congregation. She got trained. She came back and trained our mentors as to how to go into schools, which then started this long relationship with the schools. Well, the principal of the elementary school went to church at Carson City. We had some natural tie-ins, and we were able to build relationships to the point, by the time I was in my last year there, over Christmas break, we had a crew of people go in, and the school systems were hurting for money, and so they couldn't hire enough custodial stuff, and so the custodian for the building was falling behind, so we went in and did a deep clean of that school. But all that stuff was building relationships, looking for opportunities, looking what the community needed, and looking what our natural gifts and talents were, and then you plug it all in, and then you get these really cool opportunities. So again, but that's not something that we've done quite yet at Pilgrim. We're doing different things. It just matters, who are we and where are we? And then after that, I don't know if you want to go first or me, but then the next question is, what do you do next? What do you do if someone shows up?
We need to touch on one thing before that.
That's a teaser, is what they call that in the industry.
I need to give you another tool, and a couple things. One, Andy started out with Matthew 28, go, man, and we've got to go outside of our church walls. Gone are the days of people just coming in just because it's the right thing to do. It is what it is, and we can go on from there. So we got to go, and then another great passage is the love of Christ compels us. It's more than just, okay, we're doing this because we've got to have more numbers in the seats, or is it? Should I quote Whoopi Goldberg?
Do whatever you want,
Gotta
your
get some
boss.
butts in the seats.
Yeah, that's it. Gotta get more people in the seats. It goes way beyond that. Love of Christ compels us. You're sharing Christ's love in action, in person, and a great way to do that is through a thing called servant evangelism. How many have heard of servant evangelism?
What's the first word?
Servant.
Servant?
Servant evangelism. Guy by the name of Steve Sogren. I think he's from Cincinnati. Kind of pioneered this. And here's the website for it. Our project, THER project.org. Or if you just put servant evangelism, it'll come up in a PDF. And it's got 94 ideas just to get your brain going. And I will read just a few of them to you so you can have an idea of what, and some of these will work for your community and some won't. Coffee giveaways, regular decaf hot chocolate on a cool day, got folks swarming for a cup of something hot. If you're in a rural area, that one might not work. Let me see. Scrolling down. Grocery bag loading assistance. If you got a grocery store in town, you can do that. trash pickup, soft drink giveaway to employees, Gatorade at biking trails, pay library fines, golf tees. There's just all kinds of things, and some of them will work in your community and some won't. Some won't work for our community. Just that gives you an idea of some things that you can do to serve your community, and so instead of asking for things, you're serving the community, and Jesus went about serving, so I think that's a good thing.
Mhm.
He's got a model.
What was that address again?
THERproject.org. Or if you just type in serving evangelism, it'll come up as about the third one down on a Google
Yeah.
search.
Just a quick story.
And that's a free one. There's also, Steve's got a couple books on that.
He does. There's a lot of good resources, a lot of good ideas. When I was in seminary, my wife and I were at a church that decided to do a servant evangelism event outside of Walmart and hand out ice cold Pepsis on a hot day. And we were there with our neighbors whose little girl was 2 years old, and she's dad's Puerto Rican, and so she had this like beautiful wavy brown hair and these big brown eyes, just gorgeous little girl. So she would hand out sodas, and everyone, oh, thanks, sweetie. Of course, when we would try, it'd be like, no thanks, because everyone thinks that like you're trying to make them sell something, right? And so like we couldn't compete with the 2-year-old. But the funniest thing happened to my wife is this guy is funnier for me than her. This guy came out and he saw her handing out a Pepsi, and he thought she was a Pepsi representative, and he hated Michael Jackson. And so he just starts yelling at her. He's like, I can't believe you do this, you're Michael Jackson, this and that, as he's going backwards across the parking lot, hollering at Ann for supporting Michael Jackson. And it was hilarious. But I don't know.
He needs Jesus too.
And he needs Jesus too. I think I say that just because, like, if something like that happens, you get an awesome story. So you just love people as best you can, and goofy stuff happens, then bring a cute 2-year-old with you, and that'll help. Next thing to think about is, so what do you do? Like, what do you do as you share the love of Christ and people start to connect with you or show up, or word gets out? Like, you've got this reputation for loving the community, and people think, well, I want to be a part of that. So what do you do? And I really want to encourage you to put some thought in ahead of time to ask, what is our discipleship process? In other words, what do we expect of people so that they would grow in their faith? A good book to help you think through this is a book called Simple Church by Tom Rainer, and that's THOMRAINER.
Can you say that again?
It's Simple Church
Yeah.
by Tom Rainer, and it's THOM and then RAINER.
R-A-I, okay, Rainer.
If you look at Simple Church. But just what he encourages you to do in that book is to think about your discipleship process. The way that our discipleship process has 4 steps. You'll hopefully find none of these groundbreaking or absolutely new, because turns out we're in a faith that is 2,000 years old. But 4 parts of our discipleship process. We worship together. We do small groups together. We do spiritual disciplines. That would be like scripture study, fasting, prayer. And then we do mission and ministry together. And if you do those 4 things, if you grow in those 4 areas, we believe you will grow in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Seems pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that we try and structure stuff, and we're growing. I'd love to tell you like we've got it down perfect, but we don't. But we try to just encourage people to plug into those areas. Worship with us, do small groups, sign up for missions and ministries, do prayer, fasting, stuff like that. So the question that I want you to ask yourself is, when people connect with our community, what is our game plan to grow disciples?
What are those for again? Worship, small groups? What?
Spiritual disciplines,
That's like prayer.
prayer and fasting and scripture study, and then missions / ministry. Another part of this is to ask, what are the doors into your church? I don't mean the physical doors, but like, how is it that people tend to get attached to your community? What are the different entry points? and then what can you do? So, you know, we've got a hospitality group that starts to tackle that. What does it mean when you show up to worship? What's your follow-up plan with them? That sort of stuff. And then just to be intentional about, hey, if people are curious about being a part of our community, what can they do? We do have for example, we have a lady that started coming down from the trailer park. Actually, she's a survivor of a close head brain injury, and so her conversations with her get interesting sometimes. And so we asked her, because there's a group that would have been perfect for her, we asked her to come to the ladies' Bible study on Wednesday mornings. She did for the first time last week, and I heard back, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do. And so, but the leader, God bless her, was just right on it. And she's like, yeah, we kind of figured out what's going on, and here's my game plan to do it next time, because it turns out, as we love each other, it gets sloppy. Like, you have to figure out how to do that and stuff. But that's, you know what? That's discipleship. It really is. And so, you know, what's your game plan? How do you plug people in? And then how do you have that heart for ministry?
It's interesting with millennials that the trend with millennials is that more and more of them are going to get connected with your church through a service thing, through a servant evangelism idea, through a thing that you're doing to help the community, because they can understand that. That's just altruistic. That's not necessarily spiritual yet. In fact, I try to get outside of my office and make connections and network and stuff, and so I go down to the Mosey Inn once a week and have breakfast. I'm getting familiar with the waitresses and the regulars that are there, and one of the waitresses recommended to another waitress who's a grandma that her kids go to Upward, because the other waitress had been through Upward, and when we did our first quarter, the waitress that recommended Upward, her son ended up being invited by my son to Upward. He considered himself an atheist, this other guy, and he got invited to fifth quarter, and he had lots of questions for my son Alan, and he went back home and was so excited about it. He talked to his mom, and his mom said, hey, let me know when you have the next one. I want to help out. She's not connected to our church at all, other than her hut. Their family did some support of Upward, but no connection with the church other than that. And now we connected with her son, and she wanted to help out. Haven't seen her in church, but at our second Upward, our second fifth quarter, she was there helping out. And millennials are more and more that way. The trend is that way to. So that may be one of your entry point. If you're doing.
Are really important with millennials. At our last church, I think we had two. Probably, our youth was just seniors, so 12th grade. And we started doing those bridge events through VCIs, and we ended up with 25 in 6 months because you were doing stuff in the community.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, what's it worth if you have the reputation for loving the community?
Right.
I mean, that's with the name recognition thing. All you want people to know. The reason you're concerned about name recognition is you want people to know that they are being loved in Jesus' name. I mean, it really is what it is. We need to do a better job. That we've had some events where. I realized two things. One, that we need T-shirts that have Pilgrim United Methodist Church. I realized that I need a name tag, because we've done like stuff downtown with other events to try and connect people to our Wednesday night program. So family food and fun thing down at the train depot downtown. And so then I'm like wandering around talking to little kids and like, who's the creepy homeless guy talking?
Yeah.
Like, I need to.
But Andy looks like Jesus,
But
so
I was
he's
like,
okay.
That's a gracious way of looking at it. So yeah, I guess the other thing we had here was just being ready for the why questions. So when people, I don't know, when you build that reputation of loving others, and then people ask, well, why are you guys doing this? The right answer isn't so our church gets bigger, just by the way. You always be prepared to share. reason for the hope that you
If
have.
that motivated people, they would have been flocking
Yeah.
to our churches for the last 4
Yeah,
years,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. If there, that's the other. If there was a button we could push, well, actually, Gary and I'd be rich because we'd be doing this across the country.
That's right.
But really, it's not about that. It's about loving people in Jesus' name. And then when they ask, you say, you know what? And I can tell you, Jesus Christ changed my life. That is the case for me. And because of that, I am deeply convinced and convicted that other people need Jesus. That's the world needs Jesus. We're in a broken, hurting world that needs the light of Christ. And you can say it that simply to people. And I think people do respond to people do want the community to be better, and they want the world to be better. And so people respond to, if your church is known as the church that asks people for stuff, is not something you want. But if you're known as the church that loves, that's a big deal.
And you have to carry that through because, like you said, you might not get a ton of people into your doors, but the ones that come are not churched.
Right.
So they need more love when they come into the church and understanding because you come into the problem of unruliness with kids that don't know better, or youth that use vulgar language, or and you have to continue that love.
How do you lovingly have
It's
boundaries,
hard.
but that boundaries that are welcoming, and how do you do that?
Yes.
Yeah, and it turns out love is tricky.
Right.
It is.
And that's a good prep step, is talk with your leadership before you go into it, because as you share love in the community, and as people are loved through you by Jesus, and as they come in, they don't know all the ways that you're supposed to behave in church, so they're behaving just the way that they're supposed to, and you know, God's plan is to remodel after He takes up residence in our heart, not before. Because all our righteousness is like filthy rags, throw them out, get rid of them. So as we start to wind this up, we'll have about 5 minutes for questions, but I want to take 5 minutes now to ask you, and I want to safeguard you, because it's not a trick question, but I don't want you to fall for it. Is what is your church known for? What would you say your signature ministry is? And here's the caveat. It needs to be something beyond the big game dinner or the annual fundraiser dinner that you've got, because if that's the big thing your church is known for, one of the things you're sending the message to the community is that we're a needy church and we need you to support us, versus we're reaching out in Christ's name. So that's a very different message. So what are some of the signature ministries that your church has? And that may give some people some ideas. Again, it's all for your community, your context. Yes.
What we've started to do is we started this seed project that's basically Pause, and it's Panthers Always Willing to Serve, because we're Panthers in Alma.
Mm-hmm.
And two or three people in our church found that there are children going home starving on the weekends. So what we've done is basically gathered police officers to hospital people to everybody, and now it's just trickling in, and we started with one elementary school. We're going to be able to fund that whole elementary school, which granted 70% of our kids throughout Alma are on reduced lunches or in need. So we're sending them home bag lunches for the whole weekend.
So you've done the research, you found out, and when you find out needs in your community that match up with strengths in your congregation, there's an energy there.
It grows,
I'm sensing the energy that you've got there.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So yes.
We started because I did the Change the World conference last year,
Okay.
and the talk was this lady did a pot of chili and invited her, well, she did her home neighbors, so I came back geared up and said, why couldn't we do it for our neighbors around the church? So we started handing out, we've done it twice, free cinnamon rolls, and went through the community. And then I had our first block party where we did a hot dog roast and invited the community.
Good. We call it part of the teaser. Anna, can we have you switch the camera around to yourself and talk about your free soup supper at the end of the month?
Yeah, the Clare Church about a year ago, I think, was looking for their signature ministry. They were doing lots of little things, but nothing huge. And a couple of our ladies had a vision, and they started what we would call Saturday Soup. And Saturday Soup is a free soup dinner. There's typically sandwiches. There's some desserts. They've started a table with laundry detergent, deodorant, some like basic hygiene supplies, and that sort of thing. It's something that everyone is invited to. We encourage our own members to attend, but then not just to sit with their, oh yeah, go and Martha's here, but then also to say, hey, I'm Martha, and I just wanted to let you know that we're glad that you're here. They started their first Saturday Soup, I think, had like 22 people, and the Saturday Soup yesterday had 110. And it's just a way that, and it's on the last Saturday of the month with the idea that at that point when your budget is just at its max, and that check isn't coming in until the next week, that it's one extra step, that the meal's on us, and it's a way that we can love on our community in that way.
Great. Is there another one or two that want to share a signature ministry?
I think the one that we have right now is actually a cooperative ministry. It's called Dinner with Friends. It's once a month, but it's actually held at the Lutheran Church because they have a licensed kitchen facility. So our folks bring some of the food that can be made outside, salads and desserts, and we sponsor that with the Lutherans. And they serve about 150 meals on that single day, and they allow people to also have carry-out meals if they need additional food.
Plus, at the Lutheran Church, you can have beer.
I don't think they serve it, but I couldn't guarantee it.
That's next.
Yeah.
Where are we going? What are the next steps?
What is that? Recording?
How often do you do that?
Once a month.
Honestly, that one can be a little tricky, and I trust you've done the logistics with that. We do Vacation Bible School with the Free Methodist Church, but the trickiness is in branding and name recognition with that. So how do you do the follow-up? Invite them to come to church, both churches. So other ministries, I would personally, I would say, just be aware of how that works out for both of you reaching out to people. So you probably got a good way to do that. Jenny.
Well, I still have one foot downstate because we're newly moved up here. So at my downstate church in Freeland, we have linked about 10 years ago with the Alzheimer's Association, and we do a support group and ongoing education for people who've been diagnosed, for families, and for caregivers.
Good.
Well, on our Wednesday night suppers, we don't have a lot of church members that show up. So those of us that do are encouraged to sit with community members and just talk to them. We have extra bulletins on the table and other handouts that tell them what's going on. And I mean, our bulletin is almost this thick.
Good.
Because I collate it every week.
Nice. Jeffrey, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, we've gone through a little bit of a transition in our church because we've had a fair number of people who passed away. So originally, and many of them, we had some strong prayer warriors, and so our church was always known for prayer, and there's so many people who, it's amazing, the people that call that aren't members, that aren't connected, but might know a connection of some kind, and I was always amazed when you played the message or something of somebody was wanting prayers for someone or something. Where it's kind of gone now, and I don't know that we have our signature thing, but we had an experience this year that was eye-opening for me, is we chose to hand out school supplies to kids right before school. And we went around door to door and hand out flyers in the village. And
where is that again?
Hersey.
Okay.
And a lot of our members live outside of the village. We don't have a lot of members that are within the village, and so the recognition of what I like that whole thing of who are your neighbors kind of a thing. And it was an eye-opening experience for me and the people that did it. some kids went with us and went door to door and realized what our community layout is. But had quite a large turnout of people that came and just stopped and got school supplies. And I was amazed at how many people just chatted. It was actually at the very beginning we prayed, and the people that were there waiting because they're wanting their goods prayed with us. It was the story like you're talking about, the stories that share. And actually, if you don't mind, I shared that when we were handing out flyers, we had a couple people that did not want us on their property, one bit. Soliciting or whatever, just that it's okay. We're fine. We'll move on. The very next door people were always working on their truck, had it jacked up, the whole bit, and doing their thing. And a couple of them, they were down on the ground looking for a part. And I shared the school supplies, and then she had like 6 kids. She says she'll be there, and I said I'm confident that you're going to find that. And out of that I was confident. In my heart, I knew Jesus was going to allow them to find whatever that little piece was. She came to the thing. Actually, I hadn't seen her. It was towards the end. She came. She shared with me that they found the part, but not only did they not find their part, she found earrings that her grandmother had with like a diamond earring that was on the ground.
Wow.
And I said, you know what? That is amazing. I shared that with her, even right there. I mean, it was just a miraculous thing. That wasn't just a fluke. And so, when you start seeing miracles in combination with the service and recognizing, actually, the other part is I would encourage each of you to walk the streets of wherever you live.
And prayer walking is good. Yep.
It is.
And just being out, and I'll pass these out, so we want you guys to break up into groups, but one of the things I would encourage each of you to do is find ways that you can just be in your community to get to know people and build some relationships. One of the things that I do, it's hard as a pastor that I spend all my time around churchy people, which is a blessing, don't get me wrong, but I don't get to know folks who are outside, and so I go down to the farmer's market in the summer every week, and I have a booth down there, and I grow super hot peppers, and so I make a super hot pepper fruit jelly and sell that.
Me too.
Oh, it's delicious, yeah. And so down there, like that's what I'm known as, Pastor Andy's Jelly, and people get to know, and I've gotten to know so many folks in the small business community, in the farm to table movement, and people that are part of that down there, and you just get a whole different sense of the community where you're at when you find ways to plug in. And one of the things I think is, like, for some of those folks down there, like, I'm their pastor. Like, they don't have a church, but I'm their pastor. I'm the goofy guy in the booth next door, right? And that's what you want to be, is you want to be around folks, and so that you just care for people in a different way, and then you find the Holy Spirit shows up and does things that you didn't even expect to happen. So I want you to break into groups of 3, because I'm aware we just have like 13 minutes left. Groups of 3, and I'd like you to just talk with each other over this stuff, so we wanted you to be able to process and think about what we've shared. Does that sound like
Yep.
fun? All right, so just
move your
find
chairs
two
around, get groups of 3. Try to hold it to 3, because more than that, the dynamic changes, and we want people to have a chance to talk, maximize our